Hey, church leaders, welcome to the Slingshot Group podcast. I'm your host, Tim Foote, CEO of Slingshot Group, where we build remarkable teams and healthy culture through staffing and coaching. And for today's conversation, I'm joined by Rory Vaden. Rory is a New York Times best-selling author of Take the Stairs and Procrastinate on Purpose. He's one of the 50 most influential bloggers and podcasters in the world, and he's a world-renowned speaker with a TEDx talk of over 4.5 million views. He was also just recently inducted into the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame. Now, this conversation went a lot of different directions, and I'm really excited for you to hear it. As a church leader personally, there were some things that I hadn't thought of from the marketplace and different principles that can really move us forward faster. So let's take a listen. Rory, it is great to have you with us today. And we go way back, mate.
Way back.
Yeah, our stories collided years ago. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that happened?
Well, I mean, I went to Frederick High School, and so my parents lived in Longmont, and we were going to Lifebridge Church, and you were there. You were the worship pastor, I guess, right?
I had some hair, and I was a lot younger, and my accent was probably even stronger. I had probably had a little bit of hair. Not much.
So anyways, that's like 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, and your family have remained great friends. We have stayed connected over the years. Just watching you grow in impact and influence has been inspiring. But I remember hearing you. I mean, I remember when you were starting to speak in public, and you would speak at the. It was amazing about your story. So tell us a little bit about your story.
I was raised by a single mom. So my mom Tessie, who you've been close with.
Shout out to Tessie.
And my mom was, by age 22, she had been divorced twice and had two kids from two different biological fathers. And so she was a single mom. She had no college education at that time. And it was me and her and my brother, and we didn't have much, but we always had a lot of love. And she always had a huge faith, and she, made sure God was someone I knew about and something I knew about growing up, which has never left me. So I got exposed, to the love of Jesus early on. I went to Catholic school when I was a little guy, and then we couldn't afford it. We went to a public school. But then I got introduced to personal development also through my mom, because she started doing Mary Kay Cosmetics. So she would bring me to the, they had these like meetings where they would, every Tuesday night, they would get together and like talk about goals and sales and leadership and communication skills. And I guess she didn't have a babysitter or whatever. So she would just bring me, and I would be like running around in the room, listening to all of this stuff, learning about some of these principles. And she would have these books that she would bring home. And then, when I was in high school, when I was in middle school, so I went to middle school. My first year of middle school was in Colorado, because that's where I grew up. So it was Platt Middle School. And the speaker comes in, and this guy was amazing. Like, he was so funny and inspiring, but his story was awful. He was like a motivational speaker, but he was like, yeah, I got into drugs, and my brother died, and I went to prison, and all my friends died. And so it was like this lighthearted way of saying, like, make good choices. And I remember thinking in the gymnasium, like, I can remember thinking, I wonder what it would be like if somebody had this guy's job, but if they had made good choices their whole life. Like, where would that person's life end up if they made good choices? And so it really had an impact on me, because I was like, man, I want to make good choices. And then I was then we moved to Frederick, kind of like got into speaking. I was on student council, and we hired a speaker, and we paid this guy $1,000 to come speak. And it blew my mind. I was like, what? This guy gets $1,000 to come stand in a gymnasium and talk and like tell stories for an hour? This is the career for me. And so I pretty much decided right there in that moment, like, I was going to be a professional speaker.
Wow.
And so then, like, it was just kind of, okay, what do I need to do? So I got a full ride scholarship, an academic scholarship. Then I did direct sales. I went door to door for 5 years when I was in college, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. just getting my teeth kicked in. And I hated the job, but I loved the person I was becoming in the process. And I was learning about rejection and sales and entrepreneurship. And then when I graduated school and left that, I wanted to become a speaker. And I had heard a speaker at that company. This guy named Eric Chester came in, and he was so amazing. I mean, he was so good. And he said in his speech, he said, I have a son that goes to the University of Colorado at Boulder, which was where I was recruiting. So I was recruiting, I was going to DU, Denver University,
Right.
Dollars Unlimited, as I like to call it. And I was going to DU, and I was recruiting, but I was recruiting at DU and CU. And so I went up to him and I said, hey, Mr. Chester, one day I'm going to do what you do for a living, but right now I need to recruit your son. And we made a pact. We made this this deal, right? This covenant that was like, he said, hey, if you personally mentor my son and you make sure that nothing bad happens to him while he's out there across, then I will personally mentor you to become a speaker. And so we did. So I worked with his son for a couple years. And then when I left, it was Eric who told me about Toastmasters. And I said, how do I build credibility? And he said, well, you need to go practice speaking. And I heard about this contest called the World Championship of Public Speaking. And I thought, man, maybe if I could win the World Championship as like a 20-something-year-old, that would give me the credibility to like go out and speak. And so I went all in, and I joined all these different clubs. I spoke hundreds of times. I got coaching. I read books. I watched film just nonstop. And I made it to the World Championship. So there were 25,000 contestants from 90 countries, and I made it to the top 10 in the world when I was 22 years old, and I lost. But then the next year I went back, I got more coaching, I studied harder, I watched more film, went through more, courses and everything, and I made it all the way back to the World Championship. And that was the year that I lost again, but I lost higher than the first time. I was technically I was the world champion of public speaking, first runner up. So I was second place in the world. And then through that, I actually met a man named Zig Ziglar, who became my next mentor, and he was a legend. And then we started our first company in 2006, and we were like, I knew something about sales and we knew something about speaking. And so it was like, we're going to put on large sales training conferences. And so we did that. We cold called out of the phone book and sold tickets for people to come to these conferences. And we sold like 750 tickets at like $300 each. And we generated $250,000 in revenue in 3 months. And then we did that every 3 months, we would move to a new city. And we did that, and we lived in like 16 cities in 4 years. We ultimately grew that company to an 8-figure business. We had 200 coaches. And in 2018, my wife and I sold that business. And so I had met her in that business. We met as business partners. Then we started dating. Then we fell in love. Then we got married. Then we had kids. Then we sold the business. And then we started Brand Builders Group. And now we help mission-driven messengers, we call them, which are experts, typically speakers, authors, coaches, to become more wealthy and more well-known, to get their message out to more people. And, we've helped 13 clients become New York Times or Wall Street Journal bestsellers. We've had 4 clients that we've helped them with their TED Talk that's gone viral with over 1 million views. We've had 6 clients grow their revenue more than 7 figures a year in annual revenue. And so we just are basically teaching other people how to do this sort of clunky path that I went down, starting from the time that I was a kid. So that's the whole story about as short as I could tell it.
Well, that's great. And did you say mission-driven messengers?
Mission-driven messengers.
I love that. And because we have a bunch of mission-driven messengers listening today. And so it's just great to highlight that. And I have to say that I remember hearing your talk from when you were runner-up in the World Championship. I remember you came and did that at our church, and it was
That's
it was
right.
brilliant. Yeah, it was pretty inspiring, very inspiring. And then I do have to say, not only do you have a remarkable woman as a mum, she's an amazing leader, but AJ is also amazing. So
Thank
shout
you.
out to her too, and
She
you
is.
two boys as you raise them. You've got a fascinating, inspiring story, Rory, and there's so much that we could unpack in this conversation around success, purpose, self-discipline, all of that. But I love what you say. This is a Rory Vaden quote. You were put here on earth to do something that no one else can do. It is yours and yours alone to complete. It requires you to be your highest self. And if you don't do that thing, you're going to inhibit those around you from doing theirs. That speaks to calling. That speaks to being mission driven. That speaks to how your faith shows up in your journey. So talk to me about some of the ways you've seen your own faith deepen over the past few years and the role that that's played in your story and the story of your success.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. I want to, the thing that you said there about that quote, part of what we do at Brand Builders Group, which is like that's our business, our core business today, is we help people find their uniqueness. And one of the best pieces of coaching that I'd ever received was from a gentleman named Larry Winget. This was not a Rory quote. This is a Larry Winget quote, but he told me early in my career, he said, the goal is to find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others. Find your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others. And the first time I heard that, I was like, that's so brilliant. That's so good. That there was something intuitively that I was like, that's it. Like, that's what it takes to like become a world-renowned influence, person of influence is to exploit your uniqueness in the service of others. Now, what Larry didn't do was he never developed a method to help people find their uniqueness. He just said that's like what you needed to do. And so when we started Brand Builders Group, we started creating all of these, processes and systems and frameworks to help people find their uniqueness. And all in, we have 14 different 2-day experiences. But the first one is 2 days just to help people find their uniqueness. And we've now taken over 1,000 clients through the process. And, it's a really powerful process. But what the shortcut of it is, and when we didn't know this when we started the company, but about 3 years into the company, so we're coming into year 5 right now, we noticed this theme. And we were training other strategists for how to take people through this process. And we realized, there's this very common theme that if there is a secret to finding your uniqueness, it is that it's realizing that you are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. You're most powerfully positioned to serve the person that you once were. And so that is how we have started to really help people break through the wall in the mainstream. And, we've got several of the biggest podcasters in the world are clients of ours. And, we've got lots of clients with millions of followers and stuff like that. They're making an impact, and it's all from helping them access and figure out who were they once. And that's who that's who you're equipped to serve. And what started as sort of an academic professional exercise, Tim, I now believe it is a part of helping people access their spiritual calling, that it is part of God's divine design for our life is to exploit your uniqueness in the service of others. Because in the absence of this context, when you experience pain, it's just pain. And you go, why is this happening to me? This is so difficult. This is so hard. This is so frustrating, right? I think about my journey as a speaker and an author. Like the first time I said I wanted to be a New York Times bestselling author, I might as well have said I was going to become the president of the United States. Like it couldn't have felt further away, like from what was possible. And now not only have I done that, we've now helped multiple people do that. Like a lot of people do that. And so you go, we don't know exactly why we experience pain, but we do know that if you realize that your pain and the difficulty and the challenges of your life, if you have the perspective of knowing they're preparing you, and they're helping to transform you into the person you're supposed to be so that one day you can serve somebody else. One day you can reach back and minister to somebody else going through that same pain in that same moment. It suddenly provides context for the wound. It provides meaning and an answer to why that would happen and why God would allow that to happen. Which, there's horrific things that happen which we may never know until we get to heaven, like why they happen. But in our personal life, that is a choice we can make that does give us meaning. And people think, oh, they're reaching for money and they're reaching for fame or they're reaching for possessions and that'll give them meaning. But it doesn't. I mean, we have so many. I mean, we have 4 clients last year that were billionaires with a B, like billion, like more money than you can spend.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's a bad thing at all to have a lot of money. I think it's a great thing to have a lot of money. But even those people, what really drives them is not more money. What drives them is going, the thing that gives purpose to my life is serving others. It's so simple, but it's still so profound. And I think a lot of people are struggling. They're looking for happiness and they're going, oh, I want to find happiness. And I think that's the wrong pursuit.
Right.
I think if you go, hey, look for someone to serve, right? And people will even say, what is my purpose? I think that's not even the best question. I think a better question is to say, how can I help? How can I be of value? What can I do that's useful for you? Because it creates meaning and satisfaction as well as money and influence when you focus on how can I be of value to other people? And so anyways, we're living in a really powerful place right now.
Yeah, and when you simplify this down, Rory, as I'm listening to you and thinking about mission-driven messengers, when you talk about your uniqueness being in the service of others or being uniquely positioned to serve who you once were. I mean, when we simplify that down, we were once lost. And now we're found. And how do we find our uniqueness in God's story, that Ephesians 2:10 uniqueness, to be able to serve others, and then your effect on others through that uniqueness is where success comes as you serve others. And every leader listening today wants to be successful. We all want our work to have purpose, our mission to be successful, especially for the church leaders who are listening to this today. We want to be successful in the trenches, in local church ministry, and advance the gospel. You said success is not owned, it's rented, and that rent is due every day. I want to dig into that in a moment.
That's an old Rory Vaden quote. That was like my OG quote from Take the Stairs book all the way to 2012.
And I still take the stairs. When I'm at hotels on the road, I've still taken the stairs. I'm thinking of you, mate.
I like the idea of being like hearing you curse me in like the 5th flight, like that, Rory.
It keeps me slim, I think. that and running. But we're working with so many leaders that are caught up in reactive mode rather than proactive mode right now, and that's leading to burnout. And I could give you names and places. I obviously can't do that, but we're regularly hearing of senior leaders, exec pastors stepping away from ministry right now. Talk a little bit about definition of success and how much of the responsibility is on us.
I mean, I think we could talk tactically about how to help leaders not burn out. That was what my second book and my TED Talk. So my TED Talk that went viral was called How to Multiply Time. And I noticed that same pattern of people were burning out, but yet some people are accomplishing exponential results in the same amount of time as everybody else. How are they doing that? And so we spent a couple of years analyzing that. And, I literally we literally figured out how to create more time. And people think it's the one thing you cannot get more of. And you literally can. And we can talk about that. But in terms of the weight, carrying the weight, the emotional part of it, right? So there's this tactical part of okay, how do I organize my life and my time and my priorities in a way that I don't burn out? But managing the weight and the burden, I think, is a really big thing. But for some reason, what comes to mind, this is one of my favorite stories. So this is about Kevin Queen. So right. Kevin, so AJ and I moved. Yeah, my pastor. Yeah, now. So Pastor Rick was my pastor in Colorado at LifeBridge, and then AJ and I moved to Nashville in 2010, and I started quickly attending Crosspoint Church and been here ever since. And we had a senior pastor transition a while back, and I was on I'm on the board, so I was a part of the selection committee that was interviewing for new pastors, and I can pinpoint the exact moment when I knew Kevin Queen was our guy, and there was a small group of us. He's telling the story about Palm Sunday, and of course, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and now like everyone really is like really believing. If they didn't believe before, they're like really believing now, and so they're worshiping Jesus, and Jesus is riding in the donkey, which of course is a fulfillment of prophecy and all this stuff. But what Kevin said is, he said, imagine Jesus riding on this donkey and people just worshiping him and waving these palm branches and Hosanna and Messiah. And he said, imagine if you were the donkey, it would look like they were praising you. It would, you would think they're praising you. And I think as speakers, pastors, authors, we get lost, like, because we go, oh my gosh, look at these people are praising me. They expect me to do all of these great things. And Kevin said, it changed my life the day I realized I'm just the donkey. Like, I'm just the donkey. Like, they're not praising me. They're praising Jesus. I'm just the donkey. Like, I'm just carrying. I'm lucky enough to be in a spot that like I get to carry a little bit of Jesus's message. And he's the one they're worshiping. He's the one changing lives. He's the one making the impact. I'm just the donkey. And so anyways, that is something that, that I knew, like, as soon as I said that, I was like, Kevin Queen is our guy. I love this guy. This is who we need to lead our church. And also it stuck with me in my own life of just being like, I'm the leader. I'm the influencer. I'm helping people, but it's like, I'm just the donkey. Like, I'm just stewarding this message. And look, I'm not smart enough. If God doesn't want it to work, I'm not smart enough or hardworking enough that I can force something to work that he doesn't want to have work. I'm also not dumb enough that if he wants it to work, he can't make it work through me. Like, I'm just the donkey. My job is to show up with what I have, bring it, and just go on the path and say, okay, God, use me. And so I think emotionally, that is how I have found the healthy balance of like, no, I have to show up, like I have to do my part, but ultimately this is not about me, right?
Yeah, so let's pull a thread on that a little bit. Let's dig into that a little bit more. How has redefining success impacted your own purpose and leadership? Because you've talked a lot about the source of your motivation being serving others. So how has that impacted your own purpose? How can it do the same for the leaders listening today to realize that they're the donkey?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with what your definition of success is, and success is different for everybody. Like I would use kind of like a vague definition if I had to define it. It was like basically whatever you want, like achieving whatever it is that you want. But I think part of the problem is a lot of people spend their whole life chasing after something, achieving it, and realizing, it doesn't actually fulfill me, and more followers or more money or more members or more whatever. So I think, it's really about figuring out what you want. And I think, and then inviting God into that journey and letting him guide you and letting the Spirit kind of guide you of what you want. But I think it transforms a lot as a leader when you have to go, I have to make everything happen. It's all up to me. If it's to be, it's up to me. It's like, it's all about me, to going, I'm just the donkey. My job is to steward this. Yeah. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to look out for the needs of others. I'm going to try to orchestrate whatever assets and resources we've got, to do something good. So I just think it takes a lot of the pressure off. And it comes back to that world championship of public speaking for me, Tim. So that was really interesting because I went all in on the world championship. I mean, it wasn't like I kind of did. It was my life for 18 months. I spoke 304 times for free. I watched over 1,000 hours of film. I received over 1,200 written evaluations from people. Like,
wow.
It was like 36 books that I read. I mean, it was all in. And technically, I failed, right? Like, my goal was to win the world championship. But I think there is this great payoff in doing everything in your power to make something succeed, which is, if I do everything in my power to make something succeed and it doesn't, I have the peace and the payoff of knowing that it must not be what God wanted. Because if he wanted it to happen, it would have happened. Now, if I don't do everything in my power and it doesn't happen, I don't really know if it was God's will or if it was because of a more likely and obvious truth, which is I didn't show up and do my part. I just sort of like sat in a room and hoped it would happen. I didn't, as you pray, move your feet kind of a thing.
Right.
So there's this really beautiful space when you go all in and you do the work and you hustle and you fight and you're persistent and you deal with rejection, because I think of it as like almost like you're running down a hallway. So it's like if there's a door at the end of the hallway and I feel like, ooh, I think God is leading me towards that door. God wants me to go through that door, and he wants me to accomplish this goal. Like the World Championship is a good example, right? And God wants me to do this. I feel led to this. So I'm like, all right, here we go. And I'm going to run as hard as I can down that hallway. And I am sprinting and I leap and I go and I'm fully convinced, faith will make the mountain jump into the sea. And I'm like, all right, this is going to happen. We're going to do the impossible. And I launch into that door thinking it's going to open. And I smash into that door and it is locked. And I collapse flat on my face in just this pile of mess. And I go, where were you, God? What happened? I never wanted to win the world championship. You showed this to me. You're the one who said, go do this. Why would you have me do this and it fails? And then I look up to the left and there's a door that's cracked open on the side. But I couldn't see that door open when I was at the end of the hallway. I couldn't see that door was open. All I could see was the door at the end. And so God said, hey, I want you to come hard this way, but it's not because I want you to go through that door. It's this other door, but I don't know until I get there. And so that's how I sort of reconcile the pursuit of success with surrender. It's like the pursuit of success in your own mind, but surrendering to God's will.
That all-in principle sticks out to me as you talk about that, and it makes me think of Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love Jesus according to his purposes, and the prayer that never prayer that never fails. Lord, your will be done. And the whole idea that the pressure can come off you. I remember my wife Mandy saying to me, "Hey, I think you're good at your job, but not that good. Stop lying awake at night. Go back to sleep." Or my coach saying to me, "Tim, stop living like a functional atheist when you think it's all on you or all about you."
Wow.
And I love what you said once. Success comes down to choosing the hard thing over the easy, over the easy wrong consistently. And you did that. I mean, when you said, I want to be a New York Times bestseller, that's a lofty ideal. You kept choosing the hard right over the easy wrong over and over again. Let's get granular for a minute.
By the way, that's all based on Hebrews 12:11. So take the stairs, the whole book, and the metaphor of taking the stairs is, it's a metaphor for, don't take the escalator, take the stairs, do the things that other people aren't willing to do. But that entire book is based on my life verse, which is, Hebrews 12:11. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, rather painful, yet it produces a harvest of peace and righteousness, or righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So the way I said it was, easy short-term choices lead to difficult long-term consequences, and difficult short-term choices lead to easy long-term consequences. But I mean, hey, let's be honest. We're all plagiarizing the Bible here. So let's
it sounds a little bit like compound interest too when you get down into it.
It is.
But to get granular for church leaders, Rory, what are we missing that we need to start doing? And is there anything that we need to stop doing that's holding us back as you stand back and look in?
Yeah. So let's talk about how to multiply time for a second. So my TED Talk, How to Multiply Time, and my second book is about this. The title of the second book is called Procrastinating on Purpose, How to Multiply Time. But what I think leaders miss is something that we call the significance calculation. So Dr. Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People introduced this thing he called the time management matrix, where the y-axis was importance and the x-axis was urgency. That basically not all tasks are created equal, and that you can score your tasks based on these two criteria, importance and urgency. And you can use that score to basically prioritize your time and say, oh, I should prioritize. And so basically, era one time management thought and strategy was all about efficiency. It was do things faster. And efficiency to me is good, but it has a point of diminishing returns, which is that no matter how fast you move, there's still going to be more to do than you can ever do. You can never be caught up. Even if you got your inbox to 0, it would be minutes before something else new came in, right? Like, or a text message came in or something else. So it's impossible to be like at this finish point, no matter how fast we move. So then Dr. Covey brings in prioritizing your time, which we call era 2 thinking, which is that prioritization is about focusing first on what matters most. So if you have 10 items on your to-do list, it's not just going, how do I get these 10 things done faster? It's saying, oh, I should take number 7 and bump it to the top of my to-do list, and I should prioritize it. So I focus first on what matters most. The problem with that, there's not a problem with that. It just also has a point of diminishing returns, which, by the way, is very well evidenced by the fact that that book was written in 1989, and you cannot solve today's time management challenges with yesterday's time management thinking, right? That book was written before there are cell phones and internet and certainly before like social media and all these email. It wasn't even email. What we've noticed is that most leaders are missing what we call era 3 thinking or 3-dimensional thinking, which is the significance calculation. So it's kind of like adding on to what Dr. Covey said. So the y-axis, if the y-axis is importance and the x-axis is urgency, that would give you a square. Then the z-axis is the significance calculation, which turns it from a square into a cube, if you can remember algebra or geometry. So, and there's a subtle but important difference here. Importance is how much does something matter? Urgency is how soon does something matter. But significance is different. Significance is how long is this going to matter? In other words, what is the impact of this task on tomorrow and the next day and the next day? Most people who burn out because they are living, not necessarily their own fault, but they're living in a world that is designed and centered around urgency. All of us are falling victim to whatever is latest and loudest. We organize our inbox based on the most recent email that comes in at the top. But I can almost assure you that the most recent email is never the most significant email. And yet that is how we respond. We have literally oriented our lives around urgency and responsiveness at the sake of compromising significance. So significance is thinking not about, so urgency is a one-day paradigm. So most people wake up and they say, what's the most important thing I can do today? And that's not bad or wrong. That's quite good. That's how, your typical high performer thinks. But it's not how ultra performers think. It's not how multipliers think. They don't ask themselves, what's the most important thing I can do today? What they ask themselves is, how can I use my time in a way today that makes tomorrow better? What are the tasks that I can do right now that make tomorrow easier? And so this brings us to how it is possible to multiply time. When I said it, I said, we figured out how to do this literally. I meant it. It's not hyperbole. This isn't an exaggeration. Now, there's nothing I can do to create more time inside of one day. So we all have 24 hours, which is 1,440 minutes or 86,400 seconds. I can't do anything to give you more time inside of one day, but that's exactly the problem, is everyone's going, how do I cram more into a day? Multipliers make the significance calculation and they break free of this urgency paradigm. And instead of going, how do I cram more in today? They're saying, what can I do today that makes tomorrow better? So in one sentence, here's my entire second book. So Procrastinate on Purpose. This is the whole book, my whole 18-minute TED Talk in one sentence. The way you multiply time is by giving yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that create more time tomorrow. You give yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that give you more time tomorrow. There are certain things you can do today that cost you time today. In a world of efficiency, you probably wouldn't choose to select these things. I use like online bill pay as a great example. Most of us, if I said, hey, you should take 2 hours today to set up online bill pay, people would go, Rory, I have 100 things that are more important to do than set up online bill pay. And I say, well, you're not wrong about that, but that's not how multipliers would think. Because the multiplier knows that if I spend 2 hours today setting up online bill pay, even though it takes 2 hours away from 1,000 other urgent things, that because I set up online bill pay, if it saves me 30 minutes every month, then after just 4 months' time, I will have broken even on that investment of time, 30, 30, 30, 30, which is 30, 60, 90, 120 minutes is 2 hours. And every month thereafter, that online bill pay is in place, I am multiplying time. It is creating time. It's creating time that would not otherwise be there. And there's 5 different types of activities that multiply time. We organize it in this thing called the focus funnel. Again, you could check out the book or watch the TED Talk for free. And I think what leaders do is they allow themselves to fall victim to what Charles Hummel called in 1969 the tyranny of the urgent.
Right.
And they allow themselves to be shaped by a world around them that is trained to operate in short-term indulgence and urgent and responsiveness and just emergencies. And yet what the leader does is the leader cannot be hurried. And I think of Jesus, right? And Lazarus is the story, right? You cannot hurry Jesus. He's not in a hurry to tell people he's the Messiah. It's not my time has not yet come. He's not in a hurry to go heal Lazarus. You can't hurry Jesus. He's operating in a sense of comfort and peace and confidence that the Father will guide him on when things are supposed to happen. And so he's resistant to a world around him of pushing him to hey, Jesus, there's this storm. We need you right now. And homeboy's taking a nap in the bow. And so he ends up, calming the storm, but he's not worried about the urgent storms. He is literally the game of eternity is a game of the significance calculation. And that's why prioritizing a decision with Christ is the most important decision you'll ever make. It is literally the one thing that multiplies time more than any other. It is the one decision that creates eternity it gives you eternity, right? No other activity gives you more time, but in a worldly sense, it still applies to go, I am not going to fall victim to the noise around me. I'm going to confidently, steadfastly, faithfully choose to focus and prioritize on the tasks that I believe God is guiding me, the Spirit is guiding me, that these are the things that are going to multiply our time and our impact tomorrow.
Yeah.
Most people don't have the discipline to make that choice. And if you don't, you'll burn out because no matter how fast you go, you can't keep up with the tyranny of the urgent.
That's a great word, Rory, for so many leaders listening today who are feeling hurried. And 2 words come into my mind as you're talking, and they are kingdom impact. This is the way to get greater kingdom impact. And as we turn the corner here and we're on the home straight now, I wish we had another 3 hours to talk, but you've dedicated your work at Brand Builders to helping mission-driven messengers build their brand. This topic of brand building is coming up more and more frequently with pastors and church leaders, and some are approaching it really enthusiastically, while others are rejecting it at all costs. You said your highest obligation to other people is to be your highest self. let's talk briefly about whether church leaders should be building their personal brand. Should that be a priority for church leaders? Why or why not?
I think building your personal brand should be a priority in the same way I think choosing to be the donkey that's available for Jesus to ride in on. So I do think it's good because I think the devil is out there using every single tool in his power to bring people down. And so I go, absolutely, I'm going to teach people how to use podcasts and YouTube and social media and funnels and marketing automation and emails and text messages. I'm absolutely going to take the mission-driven messengers and go, I'm going to equip them as best as we can, as our team can. We're going to equip them to do God's work because I think the devil's out there. I know he's out there using all those same tools to bring people down. So to go, yeah, there's a war happening. And to me, it's a one that has eternal significance. And I want to make sure that the warriors are armed with the weapons of the day. And at the same time, I think it's very, very important that we all maintain a perspective that ultimately we're just the donkey. That ultimately, I don't want people to follow me. I want them to follow him. So to the extent that I do some of these worldly things that draw attention to me so that I can divert it to him, great. To the temptation and the indulgence that I would do these worldly things so that I can draw attention to me, that's a trap, and it's a very dangerous one. So yeah, you're walking a tightrope, but the moment you decide to be a pastor, you already walking that tightrope. Like you're already standing up on Sunday or at the youth group or to the single moms group or at the parent ministry or what. Like the moment you decide to be a leader, you're already walking that tightrope. Like if you're a leader, you already have people looking at you. So yes, I do think they should do it. I think they have to, but I would say buyer beware. There's a lot of scammy tactics out there. There's a lot of shady stuff. There's no shortage of people looking to make a buck on you, including us, right? I mean, this is what we do. But what I would say is the part you got to maintain perspective on is like, ultimately, it's not about you. It's about the mission. And that's what it means to be a mission-driven messenger. Even if someone is atheist or agnostic, is going, the messenger is subservient to the mission. You know, the money is subservient to the mission. Influence is subservient to impact. You know, revenue is subservient to reputation. Is going, I have a calling on my life, and yes, I'm going to aggressively pursue that. I've already, if you're in the church, you've already made the decision to use your life to lead people to Christ. And by the way, I think when people hear personal branding, they think social media, websites, email marketing, they think all of these tactics. But here's what you need to know. Personal branding is not colors and logos and fonts, topography and websites. Personal branding is simply the digitization of reputation. That's it. It's the digitization of reputation. In other words, it's bringing who you are offline onto the online. So you already have a personal brand. Like you can't even say, should I build one? You have one. It's your reputation. Now the question is, do people know you online the same way they know you offline? And are you the same person online and offline? But you've already made your decision to use your life for Christ. So why wouldn't you use the tools available to amplify that? Like he says, go out into all the world, right? Like tell all the people. So I'm going, yeah, I'm going to use every vehicle I have and to arm the people who we believe are mission-driven messengers. We want to arm them. We want to equip them with what we think are the tools of the day to go out and do that. And ultimately, you know, AJ and I, we don't try to hide this. Like we're undercover agents for God. Like that's what this is about for us. So I'm a hardcore Bible thumping Jesus freak. And even though I'm not a pastor, like people know I love Jesus. I post a Bible verse every day in my stories. Like I commonly quote scripture. Like I'm not hiding it. But I'm not a church. I'm not a pastor. We're a for-profit organization. That's just where I stand, and it's who I believe in. On the personal brand thing, okay, going back to where we said you're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were, right? So have you ever read, do you know who Simon Sinek is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I love Simon Sinek. Like I'm a super Simon Sinek. I think he's brilliant. So smart. I love Start With Why. I love Leaders Eat Last. I think Simon is brilliant. Now that book, Start With Why, and that whole message of Start With Why, I think is powerful for organizations. You're starting with why. But when you're building your personal brand, what we have found, it's more about starting with who. You start with the who. Who are you serving?
Right.
Who do you care about? Right? You're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. The sooner you're clear on the who is your why. And for most of us, not organizations, but as individuals, for most of us, our why is a who, right? Our why is our kids. It's our grandparents. It's our teammates. It's our spouse. It's somebody we want to make proud, which is super powerful. But here's what blew my mind. Guess who Jesus's why was? Jesus's why was a who. Jesus's why was you. It was me. We are Jesus's who. We were his why. The reason he did what he did was not for him. It was for us. We are his who. We are his why. We were Jesus's why. And that blows my mind and makes me so inspired. And it makes me go, yeah, who is out there that I can serve? Who is out there that I can help? And I think, as you get clear on the who, you'll be clear on the why, which means you won't burn out.
That's amazing clarity, Rory. Thank you for the work that you are doing in investing in mission-driven messengers. You've done that today during this conversation and this podcast. Real quickly, you mentioned it in the conversation. If people want to get connected to your work or the work of brand builders, what's an easy way?
Yeah, if you're kind of curious about building your personal brand, you can go to freebrandcall.com/Rory, freebrandcall.com/Rory. And you can request a call there. If you just want to keep up with I do a short video every week and all that, you can go to roryvadenblog.com. And I talk about all things related to influence. So you can check those out. But Tim, thanks for having me, brother. I'm so proud of you and what you guys are doing, and just
likewise.
I'm honored to be here, and it's so great to reconnect.
Thanks for being with us, Rory.
God bless, brother.
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope we've had a reframing today and a reminder of how we are mission-driven messengers, and we have a responsibility to get more out of our investment, to continue to move the kingdom forward faster. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and share it with another leader. And thanks again. Until next time, stay curious and reach for the remarkable.